Welcome to Secrets from the Scene, a show for local musicians who want to improve their music, grow their audience, and learn about Minnesota's music scene. If you're interested in talking about all things music related and meeting interesting people from our local community, you're in the right place. Welcome to Secrets from the Scene. My name is Stephen Helvig, and I'm your host. I'm a local producer here in the Twin Cities, and on today's episode, I have another producer, composer, and award-winning songwriter, Danny Burke. I'm super excited to finally meet Danny in person. We've chatted online a handful of times. He's been a bit of a mentor, essentially, to me, in that I've reached out with questions about sync, and he's been gracious enough to offer tons of advice. So today's episode, I'm bringing some of that insight and stories that have helped me to everyone else. To say he's an award-winning songwriter, composer, producer probably doesn't quite give it the full weight of how much success he's had in the sync industry. He's been doing it full-time for, a very long time. We'll get into his background shortly. But I find it hard to find somebody else that has a wider range of experience that's local in the sync industry and with more success, ultimately, which I don't want to toot your horn too much, but all of that, I want to bring the context here of how much insight you really do have into how this all works. So I'm going to read Danny's bio here quickly, just so everybody has that, and then we'll dive in. Danny Burke is an award-winning songwriter, composer, and producer, originally from Chanhassen, Minnesota. Danny has a background in electronic production and a passion for contemporary orchestration. By crafting music that works to picture, Danny helps bring stories to life. He works in an array of genres and collaborates with a range of artists. Danny creates under the artist alias of Clergy, as well as Gold Coin, Vision, and Yes Yes. Danny considers himself a lifelong student of music, art, and human connection. Please welcome Danny Burke.
So you want to start a war in the age of icons. So you want to be immortal with a loaded gun. So you want to start a war. So you want to start a war.
Hey. Right off the bat, what do you consider to be your biggest placement? Or maybe just a collection of some. I want people to really understand like some of the heavy hitting stuff you're doing.
Apple was cool, just as the brand. The Paco Rabanne, like the perfume commercial, was, I think, the coolest. When I saw the picture, I was like, everything I ever imagined. You know, kind of when you write a song, you see things play out. At least I do in my head. You know, and it was exactly that. So that was cool.
Yeah.
The biggest is, it's confusing because sometimes what seems the biggest on the outside is different on the inside. But the most important in my career was honestly like a TV placement was Riverdale. That was the first song for Clergy, which people still stream. And that started a snowball of a lot of other things. So that maybe isn't the most glamorous, but the coolest ones are like a lot of Target ads. Those are always cool. They always look great. A lot of stuff, a lot of shows. You know, the brands and ads are flashy. And that's probably, if you look at my Instagram, what you'll see more. But the in-show, like Grey's Anatomy, This Is Us, the network shows, they are the ones that get fans. So if you're looking to start an artist career and you want streaming, you want fans, you want people to dig into your collection, those can be more important for you
than a brand placement.
Versus me, I'm interested what song is playing in an Apple ad. So I will listen, but a lot of people skip those.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Right.
So It's complicated.
All right. I want to talk about your background a little bit, like where you got started, how this all came together. Why don't you kind of take it back to the beginning, you know, maybe starting at school or something like that. You can pick your own highlights, but give people some context of your history.
You know, I always loved music. I was classical music as a kid. I was never the best piano player, but I tried real hard. So I liked it. Then I got into electronic music, like head over heels, fell in love with techno. And then I was into that in the beginning of high school. And then it started to open up into more and more genres. I started producing on my computer. I'm bouncing around. It's so hard to summarize. In the very beginning, I was trying to write on the piano, and I started playing with a computer program, Noteworthy Composer, that would do MIDI fake orchestra, and I thought it was so cool. And I had this other program before Reason was Rebirth. This is in like 1998. So I started mixing my fake orchestra and my fake techno beats, and I thought it was cool. That was when I was a little kid, and I just kept doing it. And then whenever you're nervous or your way of coping with society is just make more music, you know?
Sure.
So I just kept making music and kept learning and liking more music. But it started with classical, electronic music, and then I started to branch out into everything in between.
Got it.
Strange journey, but that's what it was.
But started on piano?
I started on piano. And I went to St. Thomas for college and graduated there. And I worked at a company called In the Groove for 10 years as an in-house composer. A lot of years was with my buddy, Brian Casey, who's a great guy, great composer. We did a ton of stuff together. I did a lot of stuff solo. I did tons of bands and started my own projects. And at that time, it was just about creation. And In the Groove, as you know, is a music production library. So it would just show up on TV and you'd get a little ASCAP on the back end. And enough of it, it's a slow burn, but I was just motivated to keep creating for it. So then I just kept playing around, and I made a project with my wife that I was really proud of and still am. And
What's that called?
it's called Meme, was the original band title. And I made music videos for it and put those in like the local shows and stuff. And that was fun. But Meme turned out to be a bad band name because that was before it was a word. It was after the Richard Dawkins book, Meme. And so then we changed our band name to Secret Wonder and yada, yada. But it was just a journey, a clumsy journey of just wanting to keep creating.
So you got the In the Groove job right after college?
Yeah.
How long were you
Actually,
there?
during college. I was nervous about graduating and I didn't want a real job. So I just reached out to the one place I knew. And I was like, hey, I'm a guy who makes music. And I had burned it on a CD. And they like, we're underneath WCCO. I was like, okay. So I go there and they like ring the doorbell. I was super nervous. And they're like, yeah, we don't know what you're talking about, kid. So it's like, then they call them back like the next day on like a landline phone. They're like, we're underneath the WCCO AM building. And I was like, okay, even more nervous. I go down and show them my burned CD where I had written with Sharpie marker. And I think Darren at the time was like, oh, this sounds like The Matrix. This sounds like techno. I was like, that was the moment when like Crystal Method was hot, Chemical Brothers. And,
Yeah.
I wasn't that, but I was trying to do that, and I just started demoing for free with my buddy on ads. And then eventually we landed a BMW ad.
Whoa.
That was cool. And they paid us hundreds of dollars for that. You can edit that part out. I don't know how to talk about that, but that was a long journey up.
That's okay. I think letting people know that that's sort of typical.
It was, at that time I was like, wow, I'm going to be up at 3 a.m. How do we approach that? How do we just honesty with, I know we're live right now. This could be in it. So I'm risking it all.
Well, let me ask you, why not be honest?
Because I don't want to throw In the Groove totally under the bus, but let me say that first ad was awesome and it blew my mind. There was like, wow, they actually used this song, but it didn't, at that time we were living outside in an apartment, sharing a room and, just struggling to make rent. So anything to help rent was great. And, I didn't really know what things were worth or what it could be. And it was, it's enough to buy some meals, but it wasn't enough to buy a BMW. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So it wasn't what you think it was.
Yeah. Because you were probably just doing work for hire stuff on that?
Yeah. I was doing work for hire and, and they would pay us something from that, but it wasn't quite a percentage then. And even for them, it was a long shot ad. So maybe the budget for them was different than what it could be depending on how your relationship is with that opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. It's like, people pay a percentage of what they're getting, and that can vary depending on what their relationship is with the person that needs the music.
Yeah.
That's a long way to get there, but yeah. But that was the start.
But
yeah.
I think that's the start of a lot of people's journeys in sync. Is usually it's not the greatest deal ever.
No.
But it's a place to start.
Yeah. I think in my career, I was probably the last one to believe in myself. I didn't really think I could do it, but I like making music, and that story stuck with me the whole way. I've always like just loved it that much, but I can be confident in a song now, but I'm not sure, like, I don't just beam insane confidence, I'm like, this could be better. So
Sure.
I'm very heads up type of person.
Okay, so you start doing work for In the Groove. How long are you there?
Get me back on page here, Stephen.
Yeah.
I was there for 10 years. Right after
Okay.
that, we were going to graduate, and so they built us a studio. So we were there. That was it. We were their first 2 employees.
You and Brian Casey.
We weren't employees. We were like, hired contractors or whatever. But we showed up every day. We wrote music, and we figured it out. That was the beginning of that. There's a lot of learning by, wins and misses.
Yep.
It took me about like 8 years not to reference Radiohead for like a toilet paper ad. And still in my head, I'm like thinking about Radiohead, but somebody should just told me. But I had to find it for myself.
So what was the day-to-day like over those 8 years? Was it always just writing for some sort of brief that was out, or like how did that?
Mostly going out to lunch. But no, it was, in the beginning, there were a lot more briefs and people would come in with ad needs, and those started to change. The whole industry started to change when catalog music was such an easy factor for an editor. So the briefs went away and we just started making what we thought was cool or whatever at the moment. And that would start to show up as a use. And then you start to see the pivot from like, well, we need to get more original work, or are we, are we a production house? And they kind of stumbled into it, and I was there for that journey. But along that, I saw the value of like, I like it when I can just write a song and believe in that, and that's cool. And it turns out great. When you have time to develop a chorus, the choices are different than if you're pushed into something by nature of a brief. And that's not always true, but as a creator, you kind of have to learn how to nurture a song. So going back into a brief, I think I approach it differently than I did at that time.
Sure.
But yeah, the industry, I think, kind of moved away a little bit from original briefs. Kind of like every 5 years, 4 years, the music industry completely changes. So that was one of those periods. That was like ukulele was really hot in the beginning, and then it wasn't, and then dubstep, and then it wasn't, and
Yeah.
So it's like there's big pivots. Black keys were hot for a long time, and then they weren't, and now they are, and it's like there's trends, and then there's some trends that don't change.
Yeah.
But
In terms of your abilities, composer abilities, we talked about you started on piano, but do you play a bunch of other instruments as well?
yeah, because I've had to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I
I've
was kind
gotten
of
better
wondering
at it.
about.
Yeah, I've gotten better at them. And yeah, I can play lots of instruments.
Yeah. I'm sure over those first 10 years at In the Groove, that was a huge learning curve of,
The guy I wrote with was really gifted at playing immediately, and I had other skills, and I have learned to play. Everyone has their own speed at everything.
yeah. Okay. So take us post In the Groove. What happened? Where'd you go next?
The truth story is we were going to move to LA because I'd just been in that bubble. To be honest, I thought they were going to sell. The one place that did music was going to sell in my town. So I was freaked out. We're going to sell. It's going to be over. Ending. I was like, I need to go to LA. I need to know how clients are. I was just in a box making music. And so my wife and I went to LA, and I was still working for In the Groove. I wrote them a ton of music that year, but they fired me. And so, it was a subcontractor situation. So they're like, we're changing the negotiation of the deal, which was fine because I'd never believed in myself enough to leave. I wasn't going to just
Sure.
say I quit. It's like, it's scary. So I was just writing out of anxiety, and that's what I knew how to do. And I liked collaborating with other people. So collaborate with my wife. I met a guy in LA, and he's a great voice and a great player, and Coke Youngblood, and we made an album together. I was just like, what are we going to do with this? I'm like, I don't know. Let's just write songs. It's fun. And then he knew somebody at this place called Songs Publishing, and they loved it. And they were like, we had a meeting, and they were like, we're going to set you up with more co-writers. And I was like, what do you want to do with the songs that we already did? And they're like, we're not interested in those. We want you to write more. And I was like, okay, those songs, we'll sign them over. They were like, we're not interested. So then I kept writing more music, and they would set you up with sessions with new people. And those were other people that were younger. The game was to see if a fire sparks, and so you just keep at it. And I had learned, I was like, okay, songs at that time was big to me. They had The Weeknd, they had Lorde, who was hot at that moment. She had just released an album. Everybody was all obsessed with Lorde. So I was like, I'm not on my path to becoming Diplo. I'm not on that path. Like, I'm not close to that. And they're like, we just want you to create. They had a need for sync music. And so I just started doing my best at that.
So did you like enter into a publishing deal with them then?
Well, I just wrote them a lot of music. And I wrote with one guy. He was fun to write with, Sean Van Vliet. And then, we'd write a lot. And then I started finding other people that were represented by that same publisher. So songs, who else is writing with songs? Who else is signed to them? And I found some other people. I'm like, let's just write. So a lot of it was, even when I was in LA, was online. I worked with a guy in Vancouver, and we would just send songs back and forth. They're cool, great songs. And they would turn them in. People would be like, hey, Danny Burke, another Danny Burke song. And so finally, I got a meeting with them like, hey, we want to meet you again. We've been hearing a lot of your music, and it started to land. Not all those early, like almost none of those early songs did anything, but I surrounded them with my music, and I got the meetings. And that's how it happened.
Wow. How did you manage, staying afloat during all this songwriting as you're just waiting for stuff to float?
That is because of my past catalog from In the Groove. Because I'd written so much music for In the Groove, for just catalog music, that back end was keeping me afloat to go all in on what I thought was an opportunity. And it turned out it was an opportunity. But those back end residuals take a long time to build if you're working with a catalog.
Yeah, and you had 10 years of building that.
And I had 10 years of building that. And so I could, before those started to wane, I could have some time. But every single ASCAP check in between that, I was freaked out. No one told me like how long it would last, and no one knew. It was scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the exact same time, I had my first child, so I was a little nervous.
Wow.
But yeah, if you rely on ASCAP, there was a moment when I had the relationship within the Groove. They had their deal for this and that, but it's like, who do I work for? And then I would see ASCAP, and I saw Paul Williams on that, and I was like, I think I work for Paul Williams. And so I was really focused on how music is used and how I can fill that to just, feed myself. And don't think I fully understood at the time the value of one song or what different relationships, how that will change what the music does. That was my one connection. So I did the best I could.
Yeah. Okay. So you start working with Songs Publishing, and then
they signed. So when a traditional publisher like that signs you, they sign you for a term. And they sign for that one, they sign everything I would write for that term, they would own.
Yep.
In perpetuity. That's scary for a lot of people, and a lot of people wouldn't sign that. But I did, and I thought it was a good opportunity, and it turned out to be so. But it's scary because you're all in on this company now.
Yeah.
But the difference is, instead of just repping your music, they're interested in connecting you. Since they now own whatever you write for those 2 years, you say, I want to meet so-and-so. They'll be like, we can try to help you, and they'll help you set up your schedule. So depending on what kind of relationship you have with your publisher, they will, there's all sorts of different types of deals, but they can say, here's somebody we think you would be good at collaborating with. Here's, you should meet this person, or here's a camp. We're going to write a bunch of songs for this artist, or, and they're trying to let you meet people, and they signed you because they believe in you as a person and an artist, not because of this one piece of work.
Were you getting cuts for artists at that time, or are you mostly still doing sync?
I was told at the time, and I still think this is the vibe, that the best way is to be in the room with that artist, So I never aimed for writing for Adele and having her cut it.
Yeah.
I'm not Dan Wilson, and I think that is like, it's a hard gig. It's a hard gig to just send off those songs. And I wanted to make the best use of it. So I trusted, what their advice they were giving me. I've had cuts, but they're always hard to replicate situations.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Hard to plan for.
Yeah. That's not my main day-to-day though, but it is for some people. I think in country it is getting cuts. That is the aim. You write a song, it's vocals, the top line, and it's a guitar, and you send it to your publisher and they pitch it. In EDM, it can be the same thing. Here's a simple piano, here's a top line, and they'll use the top line, and a DJ will rebuild the drop, maybe change the sounds for the chords, but they'll use that vocal. In a lot of other genres, it helps to be in the room. No, it's not, I mean, never say never, but that's kind of how I see it, and collaborate with a lot of people.
So over these 2 years, you were writing and collaborating with a bunch of people, but the goal was always, let's write something that will do well for media.
Yeah. And it started to open up. Okay, this is an artist. You start to collaborate with artists that have a bigger, like a guy named Chris Lakey was on a podcast, and he said the gravity of an artist, how big they are, like as how much cultural energy do they have? It's how many streams do they get? But there's more than that. Like how much respect and what is the weight of their cultural
Influence
thing that they're doing
yeah.
and their influence. And depending on the type of person you're with and what you see in their team and their management and the excitement behind them, those choices will be different. And I've started to make different choices based on who I'm writing with, and sometimes I'll just have a conversation in the beginning. Like, what do you want to do today? Should we aim just for sync? And a lot of times it's like, let's do something for my artist career that can also work in media, and I'm like, cool. And a lot of my collaborators already they're in the spaces that work, that can cross over.
Sure. And then after Songs Publishing.
Songs got bought out by Cobalt.
Got it. And that's where you're at now.
No, don't worry, but we got a new owner. And I was freaked out. I was like, okay, I got to prove myself to everyone again. I had just built up from this like kid in Minnesota. Everyone's like, oh, you're from Minnesota. Actually, it works great. People love in LA. They love people from Minnesota. And I felt like I had to prove myself again. I was still in LA then. And then I did, I think. But it was stressful. Yeah. You kind of meet new people. A lot of the people that were working there leave. It's just the nature of it. Everyone kind of bounces around. It's kind of like the ad industry everywhere else. Like publishers, they all know each other. They're all friends. It's like a big connection. And if you're a writer, you write with people from other publishing houses. And you say, okay, this song is 1/3 this company, 1/3, Sony ATV, and 1/3 Universal. And that actually can help a song, because if it can really cut, if the song really is something special, you'll have all these different teams on it.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And that takes us up to where you're at today, correct?
I think so. And I moved home. I moved home in 2020, and I live in Stillwater now. So I was in LA. I moved to Stillwater 2020.
So how long were you in LA for then?
2015 to 2020, 5 years.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for the background.
That's it. You might want to cut that one down.
No.
It's so hard to summarize, right?
That's great. All right, let's get into the meat of the episode, which essentially is the things you need to know to be successful in sync. Now, there's more than what we could ever talk about in this episode, but we have a couple main topics that we're going to jump into, and then I'm sure plenty of sub points will come up out of that. But
sure,
let's start with one of the first things you brought up, which was that you need a team, especially if you're alone.
I see a lot on the internet about not selling rights, or don't sign your master away.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of different ideas, and the music industry is super complicated. And I think a lot of things get taken out of context, but I've never known anyone that has done it all alone. And if a team usually works on sharing some of the back end, if you're just paying up front for like a flat fee for your team, that seems way shadier than sharing some of what you're creating. So, whether it's a publishing deal, a record deal, management, even a lawyer, I think any bit helps.
Yeah.
You need to find those people that can foster opportunities and not push them away, and that have connections and understand like how to do it, anything,
Yeah.
Connecting dots. That's what they should be doing.
Well, I think a lot of people go, yeah, I'd love a team, but they may not be there yet where they're going to command that sort of attention or have those resources or have those opportunities. So maybe let's talk about like in order of maybe how they happen or what's most important. Like, okay, you're a local composer, maybe you've done a little bit of syncs, or your local band. Like in your mind, who's the first person that you need on that team?
I think you need to start with yourself and say, what am I aiming for? And don't make a 5-year goal. Make like a 2-year goal and check in with yourself and see where the energy is going. But say, okay, what I'm doing is a lot of collaboration. It's vocal, upfront music. It's not instrumental. Even if the instrumental places, there's a vocal there. It is a vocal song. It's almost a different category, which seems crazy to think about, but it is a different category than instrumental music. So you say, okay, what do I want to do? What am I already doing and doing well? Where's my energy going? And are you a singer? Can you do a top line? That's what it's called, top line, to sing a song.
Yeah.
There's a term for it. So what space do you want to be in? And identify that in yourself, and then say, what is the best form of that? And let's aim at something. You know, if you're just a composer, it's different than a producer, songwriter. So I can speak to my space probably better. If you wanted to get into sync, what would you do? I would need a voice, step one, because I'm not the best singer. So find a voice that you believe in that can carry that song. The first thing in your song is your voice. And does it work? Is it compelling? Are you writing the right songs for that voice? I would create a project and believe in it and make it real.
Yep.
You know, I would find that space and do it the absolute best you can. And I would say, what is happening on media that this would fit into? And I would watch TV and I would watch some media and know how it works. You know, there's a lot of people that want sync that have never watched an ad. They skip them and they don't watch shows. And that's really hard. You should know what is happening and then look at what is showing up there and start doing your research on who the publishers are, who's representing these people. You know, I mean, you could put a link in this or something. I just list them all out. There's companies that are worth following and say, you know, there's traditional publishing deals. There's people that will just represent certain pieces of your work. Any bit in a place that can represent you as best as you can is great. And it's going to be hard to meet them and respond to emails, but it's worth trying. And if you have music that works, it's a good shot. There's so many ways. I would do what I did and try to there aren't a lot of people in Minnesota that are signed. Anytime you collaborate with somebody that's signed to a place, that place will hear that music. So that's one way in.
Sure.
You know, to start a conversation. Hey, we love that song. Hey, you already wrote with this person. I'd love to connect with anyone else around here. Hey, cool. Try this person. They're online. You know, I mean, you start a rapport and you just absolutely bring all your energy and what you have to each session.
Yeah.
You know, and try to make everything count. If I were a singer, I would sing on TikTok. Just go into a reverby room and sing a cool cover. I would do it all the time.
Sure.
That's the crazy advice of now. And what worked for me, however many millions of years ago, wouldn't work now. It changes all the time. And this advice 5 years from now would be, you know, obsolete. So it's
Quite possibly, yeah.
You know, it's it changes. So keeping your head up and saying, what is the space? The sounds of now are different than, you know, the sounds in 5 years from now. And that's cool. You know, keeps people interested. And
let's recap that just a little bit.
I don't know if that sums it up. Help me out. Recap it.
I think it gets the conversation going in the right direction, at least. I mean, so when it comes to the topic of needing a team, the first thing is you have to identify what your own strengths are and go into those hard, because the odds are you might need somebody else even in the creation process, whether that's you need the top line singer because you're not the best singer, as you had mentioned, or maybe you need somebody that has more of the technical skills. Maybe you're just like a nonstop prolific writer, but you need somebody to help you with production. You have to look at what your strengths are and what you need to maybe make the best project possible. Now, project can mean a lot of different things. It can mean instrumental underscore, it could mean vocal forward songs, and it can mean combinations therein. But you got to first look at your own strengths, find how you're going to make the best project that you possibly can. From there, probably the next most important thing you need on your team is some sort of publisher. And it might be a traditional publisher if you're fortunate enough to score one of those kind of deals. But it also might just mean working with a sync library, sync agent of some sort to get things started. And the one thing I skipped there is doing research on, okay, if this is the stuff that I make, where does it belong?
Yeah.
Because if you aimlessly put music into the hands of publishers that don't necessarily need it, then they're not going to be the best teammate for you. It might work out, but it's a long shot. You need to find somebody that can actually get you placements.
Yeah, and I think it's a hard thing to judge because even for me, if I write just a stellar song, everyone's into it. Great job, Danny. That's as much as I can control. If I get a sync in 6 months, that's crazy fast. that's like, whoa,
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, the song's a failure if it doesn't sync. That's just not true. The song is a failure if I don't believe in it. I won't turn it in. If I believe in it and the artist believes in it, then it's a win. That's it. But really, if you're in it for sync and you want to get paid, it's like there's the other factor. But also like aligning your expectations with reality is a real thing. And I kind of think a lot of people are frustrated at their publishers because everyone wants to think their song is worth something that it may not be yet or ever, or that's the bummer reality of the moment, but it could be. So I think finding the relationship that if the moment comes along, they can serve you as best as they can. Ask them like, what is an average sync here worth? You get upfront fees. If you are in a vocal up project, you are hoping for upfront fees and back end. That means they pay you when they use it, and then they pay you a back end, maybe ASCAP or BMI, whoever you're signed to, if it shows up on TV. But a lot of places won't have upfront fees. They'll be like, oh, we're just sucking in songs and it shows up for free on the internet. That's fine. But you should know, like, if you do think you have a magical song, something that could really cut, something that is really special, you might want to think about not putting it in those places or seeing if it can be that special song, and it might still not, but I think for me, it's worth trying because it is valuable and people do want them, and there is upfront fees there. It's hard to get. It's super competitive. But if you're in a band, I think you're in a game of high stakes gambling. If you want to think of it in our capitalistic terms, it's not the best way to make money. But if you think you have something really magical, then make sure the place can represent that accurately.
Yeah. And I think that comes down to research. And the other thing is, if you have enough music and you are writing a lot, part of it's just trial and error. You have to work with different companies. Sometimes it is just, all right, we'll give you a collection of songs and see how it goes, and then give another company a collection of songs. And by working with different people, you're going to see different models. You're going to see that this seems to do well with this company. Let's give them more of that thing. Or we're not getting anyone out of this. Let's stop funneling songs to this direction. Maybe it's just not right for us. Some of that's unavoidable. And while everything you're saying is 100% accurate of like, you should shoot for the best thing possible, sometimes that's a little too complex of an equation to work out as you're trying to get in.
Yeah.
Some of it's you just have to get in and get started, and then you start making sense of it after the fact.
Yeah. And I think like, to understand that there's a difference between library music and publishing artist music, and to know that space. Yeah. And it gets blurry in between there, but you can get upfront fees. That does exist. And no one knows who I am here on this podcast probably. And, a lot of times you're like, well, if you're not Adele, good luck. But I'm not Adele. So it is possible. It's hard though.
Yeah. And it's okay if you don't,
possible.
It's okay if you don't start there. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Sure, it might be less than the best deal offered, but you're just getting started. So that's okay too. If you can aim for the best thing, do it. But also, if you're just hunting around for anything to get your foot in the door, that's a whole nother situation too. Let's take a quick break so I can tell you about my latest offering for independent artists here at Helvig Productions. As you may know, I'm a music producer located here in the Twin Cities, and I've been running a recording studio for the last 15 years. I've worked with hundreds of local artists spanning pop, rock, Americana, and all the various forms of indie singer-songwriter music. And I know just how hard it can be to finish your own songs. It's easy to get stuck in a death loop of endlessly tweaking things, rewriting sections, or just completely starting over and never feeling satisfied. This is why I've started offering a free song analysis, which I call Musician's Roadblock Relief. If you're currently stuck working on that same song over and over again, I'd love to offer you some ideas that may help. I will objectively analyze your track and offer some helpful possibilities to hopefully get you unstuck and back to finishing that project. My feedback will cover one of the 3 areas where I've seen artists struggle the most. The first one is the song itself. I've had artists come to me wanting to produce a song that just isn't great. But there's no sense in spending money on a bad song because no amount of production or mixing will fix that. You need strong melodies, good lyrics, and a nice flow from start to finish. The second roadblock I see artists run into is bad production. Even if the song is good, the production needs to match the sound you want. Are the sounds right for your style? Is the arrangement too messy? How does it build? Are you doing too much or too little? When all the supporting production elements work in harmony, the song comes to life. And the last thing is mixing problems. Nothing is more frustrating than loving your song, but discovering it sounds terrible everywhere outside of your home studio. Pro-level mixing is hard, and it takes years to master. Mixing problems may be holding you back. If you've wasted enough time in the trial and error loop and are ready to try a different approach, head to helvigproductions.com/fixmysong and fill out my application. That's HELVIG productions.com/fixmysong. I'll take a look at your specific situation, and if I think I can help, I certainly will. It's 100% free and may just be the thing to get you unstuck and back making progress toward your goals. Okay, so after starting to find publishers, are there other people that you feel are integral to the team? I know you mentioned like if you have management or legal help along the way.
You know, I have my team. I'm really close with my publisher, but I know how a lot of other people do it. A lot of times it is with a manager. There's certain management agencies that do specialize in sync. There's also, I've seen a lot of times if a show uses your song, if you're fortunate enough to have a show use your song, people can reach out directly to the music supervisor, say, who's supervising this show? They really liked my song, you know, and create a relationship there and say, hey, you use my song. You know, I've got these ones coming up, and, you know, say, what is that relationship? And having that conversation with, oh, I like your music. I have this other show. And that can happen. And knowing the music supervisor, and a lot of times the music supervisors are very connected with all the other places. And all of a sudden, if you're lucky enough to say, I've got something that's working, they will start to like, hey, you should write with this person. Are you open to co-writes? Being open to collaboration is really helpful, you know? And it's hard to be like in all those spaces, but that can help.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next topic, which was to have a strategy. You know, to be okay changing it if you need to, but you need to have some sort of plan. Where do you start when it comes to that? I mean, a little bit of what we just talked about is kind of piece number one of that strategy, I would think. But the whole industry is fairly mysterious and secretive.
Yeah, it
so
totally is.
It's really hard to have a plan.
Well, it's hard because people don't want to share their secrets, which makes sense, and it's uncomfortable to talk about money. And sync is a big term for a lot of things. So there's a lot of factors on why it's so secretive. And the music industry is insane. I mean, I described it as a bunch of emails that like sometimes people answer and Zoom calls. And it's great, but it's groups of teams, you know, it's like groups of teams. So being able to work with a group is helpful. The strategy, have the vision for yourself. Let's say 2 years. What do you want to do? I thought I was moving to LA to score shows. Something else came along and I didn't even know it existed. And I love it. And I'm grateful every day for it. But I didn't even know. Like that, how crazy is that? I didn't even know it existed. I wish somebody would have told me this was even a thing. I could even think about it being a thing. That's insane. I think for what you want to do, how you're going to go about that, there's another strategy. Okay, I'm going to try to I really like the music that this publisher has. That's great. Your music might fit in there. Are you doing it at that level? Work on it. Find the voices. Connect the dots. You're the voice. Find the producers that can do that stuff. Find the producers that are already published there. Boom, you're already halfway in. Like, are you the voice? Just a lot of people just DM me on like Instagram. Be like, hey, I'll listen to everything. You know, I think it's also important to have a strategy on a smaller scale. Like, what is the strategy with the song today? What are you doing today? How are you connecting your voice to the story of what you're saying? You know, what is the strategy with your song today? Do you have a strategy or are you just writing a song? Think about what is needed, what you can say, how you think your voice or the voice you're working with is most compelling.
Right.
And what is happening in the world? What are you hearing? What is happening? What kind of songs do people need? You know?
Right. What's being used? Look at the trends.
What's being used? What is that weird energy you're feeling of like that thing? And follow that maybe. Maybe don't. Maybe sometimes follow it. Like there is a lot of unknown to it, but having some sort of strategy and like what makes these songs work? Okay. You know, there's a lot of detail in just the craft of what to say, what is too much, what's not enough, you know, and the types of songs that are used in sync.
Mm-hmm.
Some more than others, you know. There's certain genres that just are a little bit easier to place than others, and they have nothing to do with how much I personally like them. I love Enya. There isn't a ton of Enya right now, but maybe.
Doing research and taking opportunities when they arise, because it's one thing to say, yeah, make a plan, but as we've alluded to, that's pretty hard to do. So the story that I've heard probably the most from people is you take what you have presented to you, like what is your next best move, and then pivot. You do the first thing, you learn from it, and then you pivot and you see what else comes up. And all along, you never stop doing your research about learning who's in what spaces on the business side, but then also the research on the craft side, as you were just saying, of like figuring out. I think there's a lot of people that think like, oh, I can do all of this stuff. I can write this kind of thing. But the reality is like, yeah, you can write it, but that one's not good enough. That one might have a chance where, you have to get a little bit more picky about, sure, it might be fun to dabble in these genres that you don't normally do, but you have to understand that this is competitive. You need to be doing it at a high level. So if it's not your strength, you may not want to spend as much time there. If you find a collaborator that can do that with you, then great. So you have to find that balance of leaning into what you're good at, but also pushing and learning and stretching and trying to do other things. So there's research on the business side, there's research on the craft side, and keep moving things forward piece by piece.
Yeah, I think some advice was given to me a long time ago. It's a long game. Whatever you're doing, the intellectual property with music is complicated. It's messy. And it takes a long time to show up. You have to first hope your music is getting used. And then it can take a year, even after it's first used, and you see an ASCAP check, And even if you get an upfront fee, that can take half a year, maybe to show up in your own, in front of your own eyeballs. That's a long time, because it takes a long time to write a song. So carving out space for it and being authentic with what it looks like, that risk, and saying, how do I go about it if you want to do that? That can be more helpful than having a delusion of what could be and then giving up too soon when maybe you could have gone a little further, or maybe it's just not for you, and that's fine. Maybe you want to keep it a hobby. That's great. It changes your relationship with a thing when you do it for work. It can, I try to keep it authentically joyful and really find the spark in it, but that's its own exercise. You have to say, is this for me? And the length of that journey to get there might be longer than what you want.
Yeah.
But I think to be prepared for that long haul, to like, here's this project for this, you're working for a publisher, things to think about. Did they ever place? I've worked with places that looked good. They said all the right things, but nothing ever happened. It's a lot of empty words. So vetting your publisher, they got back to you, but maybe they got back to you a little too soon. maybe aiming for some place and really is this music right? You really don't need a lot of music. If you have vocal upfront songs, you have 4 songs that really hit home, that should be enough for a conversation, I would think. Put your best song first. Make sure it's, when you click that email, they can hear it on a phone. They don't have to download anything. They'll listen. Is it start with a bang, start with the chorus, start with a cool sound and then the chorus, whatever. Get their attention right away. Say something cool, important, powerful, silly, whatever it is, like, do it well.
Yeah. All right. 4th thing that you brought up as a topic that you need to know in sync was that streaming does pay, but it's a popularity game, and it always has been.
Yeah, I do read a lot about streaming not paying and this paying rights, and it gets confusing because when streaming pays, they pay 2 parties. They pay the songwriter and they pay the person that owns the master. The songwriter is the publishing, the master is usually the record label. Streaming, almost all of it goes to the master. It all goes to that because the record labels made that deal first to get their music on Spotify. So that's the way they all work. But if you're just an independent person and you put your music up, all that is just stuff you don't need to know. You need to know, will it pay or not? And again, you just need a lot of streams. And it is possible to get streams. Almost all of my streams are started from a sync. So if sync already seems hard, that probably isn't helpful, but it is a path, And it's like 1 million streams is $6,000 or something, which seems like a lot of streams to get. But if you get on playlists. I keep reading things like playlists don't matter, but they do, in fact, matter. And so I hope some people can hear this and say, oh, this is something worth pursuing. I mean, as eye-rolly as it is, TikTok does matter. TikTok, if I see an artist that I'm collaborating with and they're really putting a lot of videos on TikTok, I think of that differently, which is insane, but it's true because I know they're taking their career seriously and they're really going for it. And I know TikTok can drive streams. So it will change choices that are made.
How much does streaming factor into your income? Like, is that, or your decisions?
I mean, it's a percentage. It's like 10, 10%, 15%. I mean, not nothing.
Yeah.
It's something.
But it's something you care about, even in being sync.
My career has changed. I now think of, my main artist project as it is a real project that I care about. And I try to, I don't do a ton on social media, so I'm not even taking my own advice, but I do, put up songs on Spotify and I really focus on that. And I advertise inside to Spotify and that works. It does.
You use Spotify's ad platform? Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I already have like followers in that. So I just focus on where that space is already happening.
Sure.
And it does a lot on TikTok, but those are like songs that other people are using that go viral. That's not something I started, but I try to still create the release. I have a lot of songs written for that project that I've never released. So it's easy to keep at it.
Got it. So you use, syncs drive streams and then the in-platform ads drive streams. Is there other stuff that you try?
Not a ton, but I'm interested if there are more, but those are my two main ways.
I suppose if you have collaborators that are using social media,
I
that
think
might
keep releasing music. I feel like I stay up with like the, Spotify's canvas.
Yep.
I think the algorithm likes whatever, if you keep releasing music. So now you're basically basing your choices on what you think an algorithm likes, but welcome to 2024. I think the algorithm does like it when you release music. So I do what the algorithm wants. I try to. It doesn't let me know what it wants. So it's a little confusing between me and it.
Sure. All right. One of the last points that you brought up was to seek out advice with a heads-up mentality, but always with a grain of salt from experts, because what worked for them may not work for you. And we've already brought that up earlier in this episode that you even said that, like, yeah, how I got into it probably wouldn't work for somebody today.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I stand by those words.
But I agree. And, we have alluded to this at most all of the points previously, that you need to keep doing research. And part of that research is seeking advice. Hey, here's a producer that's already doing something. Can I reach out and collaborate with them? Can I learn from them? Here's a publisher. Can I reach out to them and see what they think of a song, or so on? But are there other resources or other people that you think you should be trying to connect with?
Yeah, there's a lot of artists that are attainable to just have a conversation with. And I think just reaching out and asking questions, I think, is helpful. Talking with the artist, there's, listening to a podcast like this. I mean, people, if they want to know details, you just reach out to me on Instagram or whatever. Send me your music. I'll listen to it. But no one does. No one reaches out. Yeah, I don't know. So I think it's easier to say, but I was so curious for so much of my life. Like, how do I do this? What is happening here? And I think, seeing how the sausage is made, you're like, oh, that's the industry, but it is, but the good news is that it is possible to make a living, I think.
Yeah.
If you work at it. I mean, I work every day. I try to go like 9 to 5, just writing songs. And that's sweet. I'm fortunate and grateful to be able to focus on music, but there's a lot of other relationships to managing and working in teams that is its own stressor, and everyone communicates differently. So working with a lot of different types of people, knowing how to be creative with other people. Can you do that? If you can be creative with other people, that's a good start.
I think a starting point for people can be, first start by finding people in your community that you want to work with and practice collaborating. You can start with people that are in your network, but eventually you're going to want to push further than that and try to find people outside of the Twin Cities
You can do both.
Yeah.
I think it's good to collaborate in the room with people you know. I've learned almost everything from just creating in the room with people, and you see where people's ideas come from. And you kind of see as a mirror where your own ideas come from and maybe what you can do and how to grow. And you can surprise yourself. And you see an idea come up. The coolest thing is when somebody says something that I would have never done. Like, wow, that's a cool idea. I would have never done that. And it works so well. How amazing.
Yeah.
You can collaborate at the same time with people in the UK. Reach out. If you have music out there that is cool and compelling, and you reach out, here's what I did. I think this would be cool. Approach a vision. We should write something. Do you ever write online? You just try it. Try it on most of my sessions are on Zoom. I think Zoom always glitches out a little bit. But in that, Johnny Cash said you got to leave space for God in the room. I feel like Zoom is kind of like the glitch is the spirit. And you're like, did you say that? And they're like, no. I'm like, did you do that melody? And all of a sudden, by nature, you're like, I think like, wow, actually, and then kind of comes back in. You're like, I heard this. And you're like, I didn't do that, but that's cool. And you're like, I heard this. And that can be fun.
Interesting. Yeah.
But if there's a song there, if you focus on the song, you'll find the song.
I think seeking out collaborators, local and abroad, whatever is part of it. Seeking out other mentors, whether it's you, other people that you know in the business, having a friend or an acquaintance or somebody that you know has done something and just doing a coffee or a virtual coffee or anything just to get advice. Because if all you're doing is reading what's on the internet, you're just going to get a lot of information that is...
Yeah, the people that are busy aren't a lot of times the ones speaking on the internet. So the internet says its own thing. I would not fully listen to it.
Well, there's a lot of conflicting information. And that's partially, I think, even if people are trying their best to offer good information, it's just that the music industry, and specifically sync, is so complex and there's so many different sides of it and different angles. So some advice that people are putting out is right for one portion of the sync industry, but completely wrong for a different portion of the sync industry.
Correct. There's certain sounds that stay more omnipresent. So knowing, just looking at TV and listening, do you have like the type of voice that can cut through a Grey's Anatomy scene? Like the one that just grabs your heart. It can be a big voice. It can be a quiet voice. It can be, any gender. But it's those voices that just touch. Do you have like a confident voice that can cut through on a confident, like swaggy track, That's a totally different space. But can you do that? Can you make a track like that? Do you know if I'm saying it and you know what it is, you might be partly there. Do you understand like the epic trailer creepy thing? Like that's a different thing. Are you an MC? Are you a rapper? Can you flow without saying? There's a lot of things that you can't say on TV, that can appear a lot in just a song that you would stream. So there's an active need for like hip hop that is real, that works, that can also work on like network TV, and that can get you a ton of streams. So it's a great opportunity. There's a lot of different things, but there's some things that are more like when I hear a voice, I'm like, oh, this voice can connect to me. If it's working, if I'm feeling it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of it is just that voice for me, what I hear. So a lot of times like a producer will reach out and be like, we should collaborate. And I'm like, we should, but we do the same thing. So I can give you advice, I can give you pointers, but it's harder for me to collaborate that way, But I can definitely like mentor, give pointers. I'll give you all the information I have.
Yeah.
Like here's so-and-so, I know if I've heard anything, I'll let you know. If I know any ideas, happy to help. Free one,
Ultimately, I have reached out to you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we connected, is I sent you...
Did I give you it? I think I gave you advice. Probably just, here's what I think. Make it more epic, bigger hits. Is that what I said?
I could go back and look, I'm sure, but
Make the moments bigger. It was probably like a dark trailer-y thing, right?
No, I think I sent you a variety of stuff. And it was early on, because I reached out a couple different times. A few years back, probably, 3 or 4 years back at this point, I reached out when I was first starting to do some sync, just because I knew that you were successful in it. And I was trying to understand what the hell I was doing. And it's like, here's a bunch of stuff. And you sort of pointed out what was strong and what was weak, and sort of why you thought that, which helped me start kind of going, okay, There's something there. A lot of times, and this is true, I think when people look for advice, is sometimes you don't exactly know what to do with the advice you're going to get right away.
Yeah, and you don't want to hear it. You're like, yeah, I knew it, or I disagree strongly.
Or like some of it was just like, okay, I'm not sure what to do with that, but it became more helpful the more I learned about sync. Because then I could circle back to some of that and go, okay, I understand what that means better now.
Yeah. Sometimes I get advice and I'm like, actually, I agree. And I can't really, it doesn't really apply to this song because the choices are made. But maybe in the next song, I can consider these things, you know, and be like, oh, there's a lot of pitfalls, you know. The chorus is cool, but it's a mouthful. It's a little bit wordy.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of words, you know, and this works not just for sync, but any song. Is this too much for the ear? Should we give maybe a slower pre-chorus before a really wordy chorus? Do we want a post? You know, the post is like the key of sync. Do you have a post? Is that it's not a common song form, but it's like the jam out on your chorus, probably with a non-lyric, some melody that carries it, but you need some space for the scene to happen where the song is still lifted, but you also want the voice in there, you know, and you don't want to do like the millennial whoop, but you want some form of musical play that's happening, whether that's a ballad or like a fun song. Pretty much they all have it. And it's like, how do you extend the song and give it that space and like make it compelling?
Mm-hmm.
Also work to picture where you're not filling up all the words. You know, you can let some of the picture speak.
Right.
And balancing that.
Yeah.
A lot of times when I write, I'll just put on YouTube. I'll find something close to the vibe I want, and I'll just play it in the background. I'm like, sometimes things start sticking, and I'm like, ooh, this is feeling sticky. These are good decisions. Sometimes I'm like, it doesn't work like how I thought it would. So, you know, you can just put things on and just like, even just set a vibe. These are just like slow motion shots of flying around, drone footage of around, you know, Ireland, or pick your random country. It can just set a vibe, you know, and I think that's helpful to me to think and picture.
And it helps you get specific about what is the use for this thing? Where would this actually fit? And make decisions that way. Because there's sort of two ways I've thought about writing. For sync is sometimes it is just about make the best song possible. And then sometimes it can also just be more like functional. Where does this belong? And how do I write for that?
And sometimes it is a vibe. It's the vibe works, it's cool. And sometimes it's like these words really matter. And part of that is, what kind of song are you making today? You know, we said what we need to say. We're just having a good time. Just a vibe. Or is like, what we're saying here really matter? Is it too on the nose? Am I being too specific? Like, that's another thing I get requests. Like, this works really well, but it's too on the nose for the scene. You need to still be poetic and dance around it, but still say what needs to be said. What is that? I don't know. But music supervisors say things like, they say what needs to be said. Are you saying what needs to be said? That's for the artist to interpret. But I think even asking that question is interesting.
Yeah.
That's how it's thought of. And so like to think of your own work that way, I think can help you understand the mindset.
Agreed. Is there anything else that you feel like we should include in this conversation of like, you know, things you absolutely need to know in sync? Obviously there is more, but anything that feels like we maybe skipped past it or that just came up that you want to include before we wrap this up?
I think one of the things I've grown to appreciate is like the power of one song. If all the things are right, you know, if it's the right artist and the right voice and the right moment, and you get a bit of luck, it can be amazing to see those things all connect. If you really believe in it and the artist really believes in it, then it is real. Like, what is real? I've had a lot of conversations about what art is real. I know it's real when I believe it. And to really look for that spark, and when that connection happens, it's amazing, you know, and it doesn't even feel like you did it. It's just outside you, and it's awesome. I almost in a naive way believe in that for a song, you know. It's high expectations sometimes, but I really do hope and believe that can happen.
There's always still magic there, and it's just like chasing the right combination to...
Waiting for the magic, having a session where you don't have any magic and you're just looking for it, and then it can show up, but you have to like wait for it. And that can be scary. But it's worth it.
Well, let me ask you, this is kind of the other side of the coin. When it comes to that, like feeling really good and believing in a song, is that always something that you require to put it out there? Or do you have the ones where you're like, yeah, it was fine, nothing about it, and then you see those also be successful?
I mean, yeah, but there's always something I think is interesting about, I always try to find something I believe in the work, and maybe that's after doing it long enough, I'm really fortunate to work on the projects I believe in. So it all comes around. There's no one answer, but I try to only work on stuff I believe in,
Yeah.
But, I'm not just one person. I'm not just one thought. You're like a different person every day, every moment. One favorite song is one day and the next day can be totally different. People are complicated. So it's not just one thing.
I guess from my experience, this is why I was asking about the songs where you feel like, yeah, maybe it wasn't my best work, but it's still completed. Are you always waiting for
like the silly song that you didn't care about does the best,
Yeah,
and the one you
that's
really
what I was
put
trying
all
to
your
get
passion
at.
in. Yeah, that happens. But I think okay, they want a silly song. Okay, who's the best at making silly songs? Let's go Fatboy Slim. He's one of the best silly song maker. How do you, okay, and then you look at how is that so hard to get? Really, you can get close to it, but why do his sound so much more fun? And if you can really start to approach it in a way like, how do I just let go and be weird? My buddy was in this band and they played me he was like, here's what I've been working on the side. He played me his music and I was like, this is so weird. The edits were off and you could hear, it was just insane sounding. And then a couple weeks later, I heard it on an Apple ad and I was like, I misheard it. And I was like, I don't think I understood it when I heard it. And I was like, I missed the punk. The punk, he called it laptop punk. And it changed how I thought about a lot of things. It was his freedom with creation. I didn't think I appreciated it at the time. I was taking things too seriously, So I think it depends. That's what I mean. Like, who are you in that moment? Maybe you did a cool bass line and you think it's dumb, but somebody else heard something or it works really well. What is it about just those bass lines that work? Bass lines work great. How do you write a cool bass line? I mean, is it simple for you? Maybe that's something you should be doing more of.
Sure.
I don't know how to answer that question, but maybe there's something there you should dig into because, those silly, easy songs, those can do well.
Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely found that I am not always the best judge of what's going to do well or not. And so obviously everybody, when they're writing stuff, wants to feel amazing about it and like, this is the greatest thing. A lot of the things that I've been the most into have not done well at all. And the things that I thought, not my best work, have done just fine.
Yeah. There is a thing about being too precious with something that can be a little scary. Like if I haven't shared it with anyone and I'm getting that into it, I might be in my own way on it. That is true. And I don't know how to help people out of that, except maybe just sharing their work before they get to that space, that level of preciousness. And it's okay to have things precious for you. That's your own thing. But if your expectation is something else than that, then that's something you need to consider.
I only bring it up in that I think more about doing the work and just getting to a certain level of like where I feel like this is at least done. And then I care a little less. I put a little less weight, I should say, on how it's making me feel that day, because it might make me feel differently later. I might be really into it today and not tomorrow. And I might be really into it in a year from now. And I come back to it and I've forgotten the struggles that I've been like, hey, actually, that was pretty good. And I just try to do work consistently. And I don't care too much about how it's making me feel as long as I think I'm doing what I set out to do.
I think I try to stay in the space when I'm creating, and that can be hard. It's hard to finish a song. When I'm creating, I kind of have a list of grievances. I'm like, this is too loud. This is not working here. Fix that. Okay, this guitar part doesn't work. Okay, we play that. And the more I create, I don't know when I'm done. And I keep working and the voices get quieter and there's just a few that levels off. Okay, work. And then when I can hear the song and just appreciate it or just listen and not have like those voices, I'm like, I might be done. And then I'll go to a new song and then I'll have a million voices. Okay, this should be this. And then when I can just listen, be like, maybe I have a few other things I can do. but also underproduction is its own value. So balancing what to do when and how much to do of it is its own art.
Well, thank you so much for all of the insights and advice along the way. I know that we could do this for another hour easily on a bunch of stuff, and it would be cool to dive deeper into specifics on craft of how you put together some of your stuff. I'll put links to your work because I know personally early on in those days when I was getting feedback from you and asking about stuff, eventually I started doing some more, like trying some of the promos and the darker stuff. And then I was listening to clergy stuff, of like figuring out how to do that. And that was really helpful. So I know just because you figured that out, you know how to do it extremely well. So we'll link some of that stuff too. So if people want to understand that side of sync, clergy is a great place to start. Is there other links, places that you would like to point people to if they want to follow or reach out to you?
Look me up on Instagram, Danny Burke Music, and then you can see the work, and you can DM me if you got music.
I'll put that in the show notes. One thing I've been asking everybody is to share a secret from the scene, something that you'd want to pass along, maybe to your former self or to other people out there that's been really integral to you as you've accomplished so much.
If I could tell myself something, I'd say you should believe in yourself a little bit. I think it took me a long time to believe in myself. Keep at it. It's okay to believe in yourself.
Yeah.
I think I was coming from such a place of concern that it's okay to believe in it. People can do cool stuff. Somebody's got to do it.
Well, thanks for that, man. Appreciate it. And thanks for your time. Hope to have you back on again at some point, maybe down the road, and dive into another specific area of sync. There's just so much to learn. It's a frustrating topic to talk about.
It's a big space.
Because it's so hard to say anything that's really valuable, like succinct and valuable to people. I think that there's so much there that it can come off as just being like, yeah, but what am I supposed to do next? The best we can do is just keep trying to put as much information out there and encourage you to keep going, believe in yourself, reach out to others, and take the opportunities that are presented to you. All right, I think let's wrap it up. That's been
Thanks
great.
for having me.
Thanks for being here. Everybody that's been listening, thank you so much. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with somebody else that you know has been interested in sync, and we'll hopefully bring you some more down the line. Thanks for listening.